YouTube. Hi, everybody. I'm back again. YouTube, I'm looking at you. Anyway, I'm back again. For those of you who are just tuning in, I am Beth Wagner, and I am currently reading my father's manuscripts, one chapter at a time. And as I do, I'm editing them normally, except for this time around because there, for example, there are four versions of chapter 18. We're missing chapter 10. And it goes from 1, 1 to 9, 11 to 20, and then there's a 39. That is what I have. And I don't know. So as a result, I am just reading one version of the chapter, a version of the chapter. And then I will probably go through and mark it up for editing as I go through that anyway. Yeah. Uh, I'm currently on, like I said, chapter 18, 39 notwithstanding. So if you're just tuning in tonight and it's your first night watching, I definitely recommend you go back to the past broadcasts, watch those, and then work your way back up to tonight. That is just my opinion. You are free to your own to do as you will. Anyway, I'm going through two chapters tonight, and then I'm going to be taking a break after that for a little bit. Um, yeah, so without further ado, because I'm getting through two chapters, I present chapter 18 of Trollhunters. Dirigible was still getting used to her new armor. As armor, it was not much, being only an elderly leather corselet and cap to match. But it was better than nothing. They also had purchased for her a pair of trousers and a pair of boots, as well as a scabbard for her sword. As she stamped her feet into the new boots, Artran asked, "They fit well?" "Well enough," she smiled a little grimly. "Much better than that green gown I've been wearing for so long." He nodded. "No, I don't imagine it had any good memories attached to it. None whatsoever. But now that we've got me more appropriately dressed, are we gonna go looking for trolls or what?" "I don't know. We'll have to ask Farian about that. But I suspect we will. After all, it's what we do, and we need the money." That evening at the village inn, the magician said, "We'll have to go looking for another troll tomorrow. We need to make a little more money before the summer's over. As it is, we may end up working as caravan guards on the last trip of the summer. Unless any of you have a better notion?" Carnatran shook his head. "Not really. Maybe we can even find one of those trolls they tell stories about who have collected bits of gold and jewelry in their dens." He took a sip of wine. "Or perhaps Farian, you might." Oh, okay, give me a second here. He took a sip of wine. "Or perhaps, Farian, you might discover the trick of turning straw into gold and make us all rich without the need for of getting uncomfortable hunting trolls." Farian smiled back. "If I should come up with such a thing, Carnutran, I will let you know first of all. And if we find one of those legendary rich trolls, I'll probably be the most surprised of all here. Be that as it may, I've been talking with the townspeople. There are a good number. They're good. Blah, There are a couple of good rumors we might track down. There's stories about one, for instance." The group leaned forward to listen. It trails off. Because why would we talk about something interesting in the story? Gertrude's Fee looked over his band. There were 8 of them, collected from 3 different towns, and a scruffy lot. A scruffy lot there were. Battered and somewhat rusty armor, well-used weapons, scarred faces, usually with a sneer as a habitual expression. In one thing, they would be dependable. They would desert him or turn against him if things looked bad, or even if there seemed to be an opportunity to get away with it. They were looking at him as well, wondering why he had called this meeting, and he suspected, scorning a mere magician because he was not muscular and bristling with weapons. He cast his eyes over the group. I imagine that all, if not most of you, are waiting until we get uplands when you will kill me and share out my possessions. This will not be as easy as you think. I will now demonstrate that fact. He spoke the words of the spell he had prepared, pointing his finger at one of the men whom he marked out as a possible troublemaker. The man was suddenly jerked from where he stood and lifted 8 feet in the air. His mouth opened in shock, but he had no time to speak, for his feet were jerked up level with his head. He began to spin around horizontally. Now he began to scream as his bones were broken, limbs were ripped from their sockets, and finally his head was torn from the neck. Blood flew, but it did not go far, splattering against an invisible wall and slowly running down to pool at the bottom. Then the trunk was also torn in pieces, as though by giant hands. Bones cracked as the bits of corpse were also sent whirling off to strike against the invisible shield. Then the whirling stopped, and the whole bloody mass was set down in front of the white-faced ruffians. Gattersby looked them over. I hope you'll understand one another. Now, get rid of this mess. I'll be in my tent. Okay, that was very, very anime. The first troll they found was not too difficult to dispose of, as such things go. The Trollhunter did not profit much from the affair because the villagers then attempted to renegotiate the contract on the basis that the troll had been young and not terribly difficult to kill. The troll hunters could only threaten the village so much because they needed places to buy food and the like, and the stories were always passed from one village to another. The villagers could not afford to damage their own reputation too badly. But on the other hand, these were only troll hunters. There was a limit beyond which they did not dare press matters, though, for these were armed people after all, and one could not press such people so too far. As they rode away, Varian said to Carnutran, Thank you for your assistance. Coming forward and offering to chop the negotiating team to bloody bits and acting as though you were barely under control helped get us a slightly better deal than we might have gotten. I was not altogether acting, said Carnutran with a grim smile. Why do people make a contract if they have no notion of sticking to it? One would almost think that they were hoping that we would kill the troll and the troll would kill us so we wouldn't have to pay anything. Pothor spoke up. Very likely that is just what they were hoping they were. Then we disobliging were, and surviving were. They most unhappy were. But we came out of it, not too terribly after all, Varian said. And if we ever deal with them again, we ask for more of the fee in advance. The second troll was older and more wily, but they killed him after a hard fight. They found his den as well, and sorted through the fetid mass of sticks, straw, and gnawed bones. Beckel made the first find. Look! He held up something that glinted in the torchlight. They gathered round. It was a scrap of silver, obviously part of a bracelet, and 2 stones were set in it. The stones are real too, said Beckel. You're sure of that? Asked Carnutran. They don't look like much to me. Beckel frowned at the older warrior, and Pothor spoke up lightly. Don't hurt his feelings, Bee. He might deserting us and assessing the worth of a gold bracelet by a quick glimpsing of a woman's wrist in a smoky tavern. And while you people are playing who's been insulted by who, Notice that this is only a piece of the bracelet, Callisto said. Chances are that there's more of the same. They eventually found two more pieces of the bracelet, two silver brooches, also with bright stones, and four old gold coins. Looking at their finds later on, with the scent of the campfire driving the troll odor out of their nostrils, they realized that they had done well. So, Farian, we seem to have found your legendary rich troll. Pass the wine again, will you, Callisto? It's one step up from vinegar, but it helps to cut the troll stink in the back of my throat. This is the one we find every so often, Carnutran, who almost makes us who almost makes up for all the other times. We may not need to go caravan guarding this fall after all. As they rode along, following the rumor of another troll, Artran asked Varian, "What about the Holy Band? Have you any idea whether or not they're still following us?" The older magician shook his head. From what I've learned, it'll be a long time, if ever, before they stop following us. I've looked around, though, by the scrying bowl and other means, and the most I can come up with is a vague threat from that direction. I have a notion that they're up to something, but they're hiding it this time, and I suspect this time it won't be something so simple as a band of warriors sent out to track us down. Artran sighed. Would it be the best for all of us if I just rode away far to the south, for instance? Brian shook his head. First off, boy, what did you do to merit being made a slave and now a fugitive? You stumbled on the territory of a company who makes their own rules in their own territory and applies those rules to anyone unfortunate enough not to possess the power to object such treatment. And secondly, we helped you to escape. We fought we fought the band on your behalf. They won't forgive that. Even if you run away, I'm not entirely sure that you can run beyond their reach anyhow. Thirdly, you are my apprentice, and I do not readily let my apprentices break their contracts, whatever fanciful excuses they may produce. So, we will stay together, like it or not, and I will try to see to it that you are better prepared for the next time we meet the Holy Band, or anything else. And speaking of which, have you been doing those exercises I set for you? The pale-faced, bow-legged man who served as a tracker looked up at Castor's feet. They're careful, sir, but not all that careful. As though they think it's possible that someone might be following them, but not for sure. One of them, probably a woman, keeps dropping back from time to check their back trail. Thing is, she's careful, but not so careful as she'd be if she was sure they were being followed. How far behind them are we? Asked Scattersfee. "Hmm, yeah, a day, maybe a day and a half. Of course, as we get closer, there's more likelihood she'll see us coming. Begging your pardon, sir, but there's still some of this crew of ours have no notion how to move in the wilds." Scattersfee nodded. True, but I don't want to be sending any of them off. These people we're tracing, they're competent and lucky as well. That sort of combination can be hard to beat. You're fairly sure they don't know where they're being followed? Fairly certain, sir. They had they had that wrangle with the one village there, then went on without trying to hide their trail. And just recently they killed that one troll, then started out in the late morning, riding as usual, without a care in the world. except for that one who keeps dropping back to have a look at the trail behind them. Gatter's fee considered telling the fellow to check their own back trail, but decided against it. These ruffians feared and respected him, but if any of them thought there might be a possibility of profit in betraying him, they would not hesitate, and for him to suggest checking the back trail would be a hint that someone might be back there. Not at all the kind of hint to give this crew. Keep up the good work, was all he said. Okay. Okay, I need to take a quick break out of the story just to explain a thing, and I just have to figure out where it is. So, there is a part in the story where King Fenimore um, has decided that he's going to set out a commander after Gattersby. So, it's in one of these. Ugh, it's in one of these chapters, somewhere in here. It's not in the part I'm reading right now, but it's somewhere in here. And I'm not going to try searching for it in order to read the section, but just scene starts. Fenimore is really, really frustrated, really, really angry, and he's like, "I need to send off somebody to track this. You're going to go." Doesn't mention the guy's name. The guy's name is right here. In the end, when I finally do the uh, final fixing, I'll have that scene, that little mini scene, right leading into this scene. So it's all one big thing. Because I even have a note here. Fenimore should be in this, and he should, and he is somewhere. I just have to pull it, put it in. Captain Zaktor of the Tharquin Sashto Regiment scratched his head. He missed the feel of the helmet. He missed the feel of his armor. Both armor and helmet, along with the Sashto, were too readily identifiable. All these were packed away on the packs carried by the donkeys behind the train. How close are we, Landavor? He asked. Oh, we're coming up on them, Captain. For some reason, the magician doesn't seem to be making a direct run for anywhere. I thought at first that he was headed for Yitzigaz. Yitz, Yitzigos. I'm sorry. It's, yeah, pronunciation for this, not my strong point. Yitzgos. Trying. But we've seen that he stopped at a couple of towns on the way to recruit some pretty bad characters. Almost as if he had a job he wanted to take care of before heading for Yitzgaz. Maybe I should say I'm fairly sure he has something in mind. Because that path he's taking, it's like he's following someone else who's roaming the uplands. You want us to hurry up a bit? Zaktor shook his head. Our most wise and terribly courageous magician seems a little loath to actually face Gatter's fee. He keeps on making preparations. I'll give him a little while before I risk making a mess out of this by forcing him to go before he's ready. So, they have a magician with them. Got it. Clarity. Editing for clarity. Sorry, I'm just trying to make a note here. There we go. But don't worry, I've no intention of wandering the uplands until old Holger himself comes out of Tanyar Tanara, the city, to ask what we're doing wandering around his uplands. Yes, I can read better, but there's stuff and things. Callisto called a halt and pointed to a white boulder streaked with moss. We came on this stone 2 days ago, which I noted as a mark that we were coming too close to the territory of the Holy Band. I turned us aside and off we went. Now suddenly here we are back again? I know I didn't lose my way, and I have a bad feeling about things. Marianne nodded as calmly as if she had just mentioned that the north border of Tenero was far off. I've said before that there were magical disturbances about that I couldn't quite define. He glanced briefly at our terrain. And I think, or rather, I'm quite sure, this is a sign of something. Well, let's stop here for a bit while I do some probing again and just see what I can find out. They mounted and dismounted and stood around while Varian cast his spells, unease growing on them all the while. Finally, he turned to them. It's a subtle spell, one so subtle I might never have noticed it until too late. But we're being drawn toward the territory of the Holy Band. It's a strong spell in its way, and I might not have been able to do anything about it, even if I had been warned before. If we try to fight it and pull ourselves away, we'll end up spending so much effort that we'll wear ourselves into nothing. On the other hand, if we let it bring us there without struggling against it too much, it is possible that we can provide a surprise when we arrive. While I'm not the world's best magician, there are things I can do to alleviate that, particularly if I'm given time to train Artran. In the end, we have to fight the whole holy band. Asked Carnitran. Oh, certainly, said Pothor. Not too fearing thee. There will be enough of them to go around. There will enough of them to go around be. Carnitran shot him a sour look. Do you never take anything seriously? Or how about, do you ever take anything seriously? There we go. That's better. Fixed it. The big warrior shrugged. What? Should I weeping and wailing be because it appearing that we are lost, that we are doomed is? Death is eventually coming all is. And at best, we can putting it off a few more days be. Carnitran would have said something more, but Varians broke in. Despite our big friend's nonchalant philosophy, we can do more than simply go meekly to our doom. I can help, And with young Artran's assistance, we can help more than a bit. We can have, we, oh boy, we really have not much choice, you know. Carnitran shrugged. So we make ourselves a hot mouthful for them to chew? The others nodded. Varian carried on. Just in case the spell changes, such as having added to it a compulsion to surrender ourselves readily, I have cast a spell of my own which will warn us. Now, Artran, I have perhaps 3 days to teach you the work of 10 years, and there will be little time for repetitions and misunderstandings. Are you ready? Yes. There was no other answer that made sense. You're leading us around in circles, Lord Magician, the tracker reported to Gatter's fee. I see, he replied, giving away nothing in his tone. Sir, if they know we're following them, if they suspect it, they might be laying ambushes for us. They don't know. He was fairly sure of this. He had checked them by means of a scrying bowl from time to time. He was also tentatively checking what magic they might have been using. One thing he had discovered was that they were under a compulsion spell, which was drawing them to us in a certain direction. This was interesting, but he had no intention of allowing it to interfere with his revenge. The man waited for a moment for Gatra's fee to explain his statement, and when no statement was forthcoming, went back to his place. The magician considered giving his men more information, then discarded the notion. Let them continue to think that he knew everything about everything. It was easier that way. Captain Zactor furrowed his brow. They've come around in a circle, Landivore? Does that mean that the magician has discovered us on his trail and is planning a trap for us? I doubt it, sir. If he were planning some sort of trap, he wouldn't be going around in circles, doing this going around in circles business first, to warn us something was up. What I'd say is that he's following someone else, and for some reason, those others are going around in circles. The captain nodded. Keep your eyes open. It was a wasted command. The man would know what was expected of him. But on the other hand, it was the expected thing to say. They moved on through the shadowed forest. Ah, what am I doing? Sorry, guys. Okay. The statue had reappeared, stomping and tramping off to one side or the other of their trail. He's still with us, commented Carnitran. Well, I expect that we can use all the help we can get. Beckel muttered something dark and indistinguishable, and Pothor gave one of his usual chuckles. Well, I expect we can use. Whoops. Ah, come one, come all. And perhaps old Mothgar's Tugrain light infantry will joining us be. Varian continued his lecture to Artran. There are a number of things about magic that have been little studied. Many of these have been ignored, not through foolishness, but through pride of individual sorcerers. Most magicians tend to be an individualistic breed, disliking to share their hard-earned knowledge with others. and disliking to help each other in any way but the simplest of tasks. Because of that, certain things that are hinted at in the nature of certain spells have never really been studied, though some have written books on the suppositions of what ought to happen if certain things were done. So we're going to attempt something which, if it works, will give us a particular spell of unprecedented power. And, as I've said, this is the kind of thing you might have been doing many years from now, or not that the necessity is upon us to find a solution now. He paused, his face grave. It occurs to me that I am no better than most magicians in at least one regard. I have been keeping a secret journal since my youth of spells that I have tried, both that have failed and those that have succeeded. I have also put in copious notes of spells that I may have heard of, things I have guessed about their makeup, things I've actually been told about them, and so on. All these notes are in a small book in my saddlebag, and if I should fail to survive one of our adventures, it will be your inheritance from me. But back to our present situation. I'm about to explain something to you, and I want you to listen very carefully. Yes, I know you've learned to listen very carefully and learned to repeat lessons back to me. This time, I want you to be ready to ask questions if there's anything you do not fully understand. Ready? Good. Okay, so that was chapter 18. Um, I left a note at the very end of this, and it's real. Add stuff from other 18 because partway through this story, the chapters veer off, and not only like there's already alternate chapters, but they're all very similar, like really really similar. And then something happened. It's chapter 10. The missing chapter 10. Within that chapter, there's a branch off because chapter 9 has like something that gets broken, and I think that's where it veered off with the two. So in trying to fix everything, I think chapter 10 may have been irredeemable, and chapter 9 is where it started falling apart. Eh. So that's kind of where we're at with that. So what I will do is I'm going to start doing some readings of books that I've already published. And when I finally publish this book, I will circle around to it. And those of you who are listening now will get a chance to listen to the new version of it, the final version, as it were. So, without further ado, though, on to chapter 19. Okay, I'll give you 1 second first. I'm sorry, I have allergies, and they're quite bad right now, so pardon me. Okay, chapter 19. The Trollhunter swayed on horseback along the trail, winding among the trees, riding with a casual air that suggested they had no particular worries. Varian lectured Artran as they went, using such arm gestures as were consonant with horseback riding. Consonant? As were consonant. Okay, great. Just because you can use big words doesn't mean you should use big words. We are going to attempt something different, Artran. It's not something I've ever tried, but I have confidence in its success. I've told you, he ducked his head under a low branch. I've told you about the dislike of magicians for sharing their knowledge. He smiled. I believe I've told you at great length, several times. But we are going to attempt is something I've worked out in theory, but I've never tried in practice. It's not something I would usually do as an apprentice, as relatively new as yourself. That says nothing about your ability or lack of ability, only your lack of experience. He paused. But the Holy Band wants you, and they want us because we have kept you from them. And they have demonstrated a mastery of certain forms of magic, which are a little beyond my level. However, the armor of their warriors gives us cause for hope. They have not altered their armor over all these years, and their magicians are only senior members of the society, used to doing things the way they've always been done. Just as the warriors use the same arms and armors they have done for ages, so it seems their magicians use the same spells they've served them for ages. This means that they may not be ready for a new trick, just as they were not ready for Gudamazia's concealment spell. Wait a minute. I don't remember that happening. So I'm confused now. I'm like wondering if this is Chekhov's concealment spell, which is actually Gutmansia's. Maybe, perhaps. This new spell is a means of amplifying magical power. It needs at least two people to do the strengthening. It's as if I were to make a spell, and you were to take that spell and focus it like a viewing glass, then pass it back to me, and I were to focus it further. He looked at Artran to see if you're absorbing all this. The result is an extremely powerful spell. Why not pass it back and forth a few more times to make it more powerful? Varian turned a brilliant smile on him. A very logical next step, boy. I am pleased that you would think of it. However, there are difficulties with that. But the nature of most magic is to contain wild elements, which must be controlled. This spell would augment those wild elements as well. Control of those wild elements requires a good knowledge of your limits. I'm fairly sure of mine, and I have some idea of yours. Best for us not to destroy ourselves with the same spell we use for protection. Eh? What sort of spell do you intend to use? Varian smiled slightly. One thing at a time. We'll practice magic first with some very innocuous spell. For instance, a beetle illusion. I will decide in the next little while what would be best for the next test. Artran frowned. Aren't there magicians likely to detect us working at this? Varian shook his head. Their detection spells are the sort I can sense without hardly trying. Whenever I feel them trying to discover what we are up to, I'll call a halt until they stop. Judging from past performance, though, I suspect they'll content themselves with scrying on occasion just to be sure that we're still on our way. Now, if you're finished with your questions, we'll begin work. Hmm. Lord Wizard, the scout said, we're getting nearer to the land claimed by the Holy Band. This meant something to Gatter's fee, some abstruse bit of lore, but he couldn't exactly call it to mind. Something about a group of warriors sworn to studying the arts of war under the protection of some god or other. This holy band is to be feared, then? Arrogance had served him well hitherto. There was no reason why it should not continue to do so. There was fear and amazement on the man's face. Lord Wizard, do you not know of the holy band? He shrugged. Tell me what you've heard of them. He said it as though he had some idea of what the man had heard, and that his notions were greatly exaggerated. They are said to be a band of warriors, Wizard, to fight under their commanders to the death if need be. It is said that the senior among them study the magical arts as well, and they make slaves of all who go into their lands unbidden. And you fear them more than me? The fellow opened his mouth, closed it, cleared his throat, trying to decide how to answer that. Gattersby chuckled. Go back to your place and don't worry yourself over this holy band, whoever they may be. If they leave us alone, I'll leave them alone. The man looked at him, then began to ride off. As he went, he looked back again. His expression was something to see, and clearly a lot of it had to do with men revolving in air while being torn to pieces. Gattersby maintained his expression, but some hints of things he had heard of the Holy Band were coming back to him. They were a military order, as men had informed him. Some of the senior ones did study magic. That meant they were not to be ignored then, but then their magic would likely be that of amateurs. And what did he need fear of that? Sorry, there's just like some stuff that probably. Sorry, a little bit disappointed here. Next scene. The Trollhunters were deep now in the territory of the Holy Band. When they had crossed the border with no sign of the Holy Band ready to greet them, Varian had said, well, more time for us to practice then. Captain Zactor was far enough south that he knew nothing of the Holy Band. He did know that they were now going in a straight line. There had been no attempt yet to ambush them. He was becoming a little concerned. Unpack the weapons. I have a feeling we're going to be needing them soon. He was an old enough soldier to say such things without making his men unduly nervous. None of them thought more of it than he was an experienced leader and was expecting trouble. That was enough for them. Zactor II said, good notion, sir. Even if we only get in one shot to a battle, the men consider themselves Sashto men, and that weight of wood and metal is comforting to have in the hand. The time for practicing was ended. They were now on the main road, riding down toward the little town that formed the headquarters of the Holy Band. When they spoke at all, it was in quick monosyllables. They were certainly being watched now, and they didn't want to give away anything to their enemies. Artran recognized the buildings. A lot of bad memories here, he muttered. Don't think about that, murmured Varian. Remember, you escaped them once, and you're better prepared to fight them now. Bertrand stared at Dirigiwa and wished it had been possible to leave her behind somewhere. Even as that thought came to him, he grinned. Imagine Dirigiwa being left behind because he decided something was too dangerous for her. If the danger didn't kill him, she would when she caught up to him. Eyes on me, Artran, muttered Farian, barely moving his lips. Artran frowned, wondering what he was doing, letting his mind wander when they were just at the point of coming into battle. Then 50 or so of the holy band came down the road, strolling as though they had no worries, as though this little group riding toward them were going to allow themselves to be led quietly into captivity. As the two groups neared each other, Artran wondered when Farian was going to give the word to begin things. Was he not leaving it awfully late? But the old magician did not seem to be particularly worried about anything either, just riding calmly as though the men in the old-fashioned armor were merely welcoming committee to escort them in as honored guests. Suddenly, the matter was taken out of Arian's hands. Bursting out of the brush behind them was a statue. Whatever it was thinking, whatever it was capable of thinking, seemed to have recognized that the men of the Holy Band were enemies, and it only knew one thing to do when enemies were in sight. Farian shouted, "Atthug and racists, and all the hopping hares of springtime! Now, Artran!" Artran, clutching his willow wand in hand, began the spell, finishing it off and leaving it to Farian, who focused it and passed it back to him. He focused it once more. It was difficult to handle this time, as if it wanted to burst out and do strange things beyond what it was intended for. It was a mirror spell, a spell to strengthen spells and reflect them back at their casters, and it settled, facing outward, over the little company as they rode. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, Azaratran felt as though a mist had been cleared away from his mind. The spell, which had been drawing them, was broken, reflected back at its casters, dazing the magicians of the Holy Band. In the meantime, Dirigiwa, Beckel, Callisto, Carnutran, and Pothor rode into the melee, gathering around the statue. The warriors of the Holy Band were attacking the statue, metal clashing on stone, spear shafts cracking, and men being flung back senselessly by the mighty blows of its solid limbs. So, yeah, there's also four versions of chapter 19. I accidentally stapled two of the chapters together, which is still chapter 19, so it's just one continuing big chapter. So that was chapter 18 and chapter 19. It's kind of weird. It's kind of weird with them because, like I said, it's kind of jostled because I'm not sure if I was reading the same continuity of chapters all the way through. It's fine if you're like reading all the same chapters from all the same section, but I don't know which ones they were. What I might do is, I don't know, actually kind of, because I don't need a lot of edits on here. I mean, I need some serious edits, don't get me wrong. But I've had to do more edits on books, and this one has a reasonable amount that I can kind of work in fairly easily, with the exception of reconstructing chapter 10. Chapter 10 is pretty big. That's the pivotal chapter that just happens to be missing. So I'll have to recreate it. I'll do it. It'll be fine. It's pretty straightforward. We all kind of know what happened in the chapter, even though it wasn't told to us. It was implied. And there'll be more implied when we read the final chapter in chapter 39, and then a wrap up, which is going to be tomorrow night. It's going to be kind of funny because chapter 39 let's just say chapter 39 is definitely chapter 39. It's not like right after chapter 20. It's a ways down, but it's interesting, and interesting enough that I think is actually, well, I'll talk about it tomorrow. Thank you everybody for tuning in. I'm sorry about my nasally nature tonight. Just my allergies have decided to convulge on me. I hope to do better tomorrow night. We'll see how it works out. But thank you everyone for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And I'll see you all tomorrow with the final, like I said, chapter 20. And trust me, I read chapter 39. It is interesting and leaves room for like the imagination. In my mind anyway. I know it'll be really out there, but let me just tell you. Mwah. Anyway, talk to y'all tomorrow.